Hey guys, let's talk about radar detectors. And in this video, we're going to be addressing whether or not affordable radar detectors are worth it. As you guys know, if you've probably looked, there are inexpensive radar detectors. There's kind of budget range radar detectors. You've got mid-priced ones, and you've got some of the high-end ones. Obviously, the more inexpensive ones are a lot more budget friendly. You spend less money. The high-end ones, we got to spend more money. And really, are they worth it? Like, do you need it? Depending on how fast you drive, where you drive, that kind of stuff. Are they really worth it? So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take a look at some test results, testing out a whole bunch of different radar detectors, kind of the whole gamut. I'm also going to be showing you some videos from real-world situations. From tests, you're going to get to see things from the radar detector's end and also from the police radar gun's end. I'm going to be covering a couple different important things, and I'm also going to be covering different terrains. So basically what we're going to do is you'll see that one radar test doesn't actually give you the whole picture. It tells you how things work in one scenario. Your terrain that you're driving in may be very different and will lead to very different results. So I'm actually going to show you how that works. And so what we're going to do here is go ahead and take a look at a number of different things so that you'll get a better understanding of the differences between the less expensive and the more expensive radar detectors in general. And that way you'll get to see whether or not the less expensive ones will protect you to the degree that you want. They may or they may not. We'll take a look at really how much protection you get if you spend less money and how much protection you get if you're willing to be spending more money. So let's go ahead and get started. To start us off, we're going to be taking a look at a radar detector test from back in 2012. This was put on by ECCTG, and this test was about 2.5 years ago. If you take a look at the detectors that are being used, you'll see there's a bunch of detectors from Beltronics, Escort, there's a Cobra in there, a couple of V1s, there's some Whistlers. Since this test was put on a couple years ago, there have since been updates put out. And so this is not necessarily going to be reflective of what you'll see today, but this is still going to give us a good idea of what you can expect. And I'm going to point out some of the differences between the tests that were done a couple years ago and what you'll see now. So for this particular test, you'll see we had a radar gun set up in a vehicle. The radar guns pointed out the windshield, and we're running a whole bunch of different bands. We've got our KA bands, which is 33.8, 34.7, 35.5, and then we're also going to be testing against K-band. Now, as far as the actual course, here's a visualization of the course itself. You'll see the radar vehicle is parked right here, and then the kill zone, which is the point where the vehicle can actually first be clocked, is going to be this point right here. It's about 2,600 feet away. And then this area way back there is the area where the radar detector can be picking up the signal before it's in range of the radar gun. So this is the area where your radar detector, if it goes off there somewhere and you're getting alerted, you'll have sufficient time to actually slow down. And that's what we're going to be looking for. So let's go ahead and take a look. The first set of test results that we're looking at here are going to be for K-band. This point right here where the x-axis starts around the 2,500 foot mark, that's actually around the kill zone. Remember the kill zone was like 26 something? So this point right here is actually too late. That's the point where your speed can be registered. So anything way over to the right is going to be an area where the detector actually alerts initially. So way out there, you got plenty of time to slow down. And if you take a look here from top to bottom, we've got the SDR Plus, the red line, RX65s, there's some V1s in there. So you'll see, even the very bottom detectors, we've got the Cobra there, that Passport IQ, and a couple Whistlers. You'll see even the worst performing detector in this test still gave us almost 2,000 feet worth of detection range, which is plenty of detection range to slow down against a constant on source like this. So you may be saying, okay, it got 4,300 feet. The best one got 5,800 feet. Why in the world would I need to be spending, SDR Plus sells for over $1,000, and the Whistlers are a lot cheaper than that, in the 100 to maybe 200 at most range for the top end one. Like, why should I spend so much more for a high end detector if I can get a lower end detector and I can still get a save? And that's exactly the question that I want to go ahead and address, because that is a fantastic question. And this is what I mean by one test itself doesn't give you the whole picture. And this is why we're going to go ahead and take a look at a couple different tests so that you can really understand the differences. So if we take a look here, this is a test against K-band. And oh, as I mentioned, this is an older test. Since this test was done, the red line has since gotten band segmentation and RDR, which has led to a very nice performance bump. So its detection capabilities are a lot higher. And same thing with the V1. The V1 now has custom sweeps, and if you turn off KA guard and enable custom sweeps, just like with the red line now, if you do that, you'll get much better performance. So that'll help it jump up there above what you're seeing here. So anyways, looking at this, you'll see that every detector tested gives you plenty of warning against a constant on source. If we go back and you take a look up here, if you take a look at the terrain, see how it's all flat? There are some trees and whatnot up there, but this is a relatively simple course. Yes, there are some curves. If you take a look again at the course itself, you'll see that there are some curves back where it's getting detected. But there's not too many trees in the way. It's mostly flat. It's some curves, but not too many trees to block the signal. So it is relatively easy for a detector to actually pick up the signal from a distance. That's not always the case. Obviously, some situations are harder. Anyways, let's go ahead and take a look at KA band next. KA band, you'll see similar results, a little bit different ranking, but very similar here with the detectors. You'll see the higher end detectors perform better. You'll see the 8500X50 black does fantastic. I mean, it beats out the V1 and the red line. That's amazing. Again, this is before the BSRDR came out and custom sweeps, but nonetheless, that is excellent performance. So that's a great performer there when it comes to range. Same thing, 9500 Ci got BSRDR, so it does a lot better now. The V1s, all that. But you'll see here, even on this band, it looks like the low-end whistlers, they don't perform quite as well. They're down in the 3,000 foot range, but that's still well above the 2,500 foot range, and it's still going to provide you sufficient detection range against constant on. And then with this test, you can tell there's obviously a lot involved. They also ran 35.5 and 33.8, but not to the extent just due to sheer time constraints. So cool, that gives you an idea, and basically the gist of looking at these tests is you'll get to see that, yes, even the low-end detectors are going to provide you with sufficient warning time against a constant on source like this. However, this is not always the case, and this is what we're going to take a look at next. We're going to take a look at a couple different videos showing you different situations which are a lot harder for a radar detector to pick up the radar signal. And this is really where the differences start to show up. So the first thing that we're going to take a look at here is a test that Hidden Cam did on the forums. He tested a Whistler, the Pro 78 SE, against a constant on source. In this case, it was a Stalker 2, and this course is going to be a lot harder. We've got not only some curves, but there's a lot of trees in the way, and trees can absorb radar like crazy. So if you're driving in an area with lots of curves and trees, it's a lot harder for a radar detector to pick up the signal. So let's go ahead and take a look at a video of a Whistler running against a very simple constant on source. And the way this test is going to be done, the driver was driving at 60 miles an hour, and the goal is to actually slow down to 30 as soon as your detector alerts, right? You get the signal, something's going on, slow down. And then what you're going to see is, as he's in the process of slowing down, you'll see how long it takes for the speed to actually show up on the radar gun and also what speed it registers. So again, we're going to be wanting to slow down from 60 to 30. Let's go ahead and take a look.
So this is run 4.
KA 46. So as you'll see the
I think the layout would have had me, but we'll see. Honk again just to make sure the queue up is correct in the recording.
So as you can see from that test, once the detector went off, we had about 2 seconds of warning time, and that was enough time to slow down from about 60-ish to 46 was when the radar gun actually picked up the signal. So let's actually take another quick look at that so you can see that. You'll see the detector goes off, we have about 2 seconds, and then the radar gun is able to initially pick up the speed. Let's take a look.
think the layout would have had me.
So in that situation, against an easy constant on source, we're not talking instant on or any sort of fanciness, but just a simple constant on source, we got owned in this situation. And that's exactly what we want to avoid. And in situations like this where the terrain gets tougher, that's where things start to, get separated. There's two issues that we had there. Number one was the sensitivity of the detector itself, its inability to actually detect the signal from farther away. The other detectors that were tested were able to give you way more warning time, like well in advance of when the whistler started going off. So because of that, you got plenty of time to slow down. The second thing was the off-axis performance. The whistler is not quite as good at actually detecting signals coming in from an angle. And so as you're approaching the signal, not only is it weaker and being obscured by trees, but it's also coming in from the angle. The whistler is better at detecting signals that are coming straight on from the front. It's not as good at detecting signals that are coming from the side. And this is true of a lot of the lower end detectors, which you may or may not see in any one particular test. But in this one, you'll definitely see that illustrated very clearly. In another test, we're going to go ahead and do this one, was done by Open Road on the forums. He found a really great source. This was in California. Also a little bit different terrain, not quite as many trees and all, a little bit more open, but there's a hill involved. And in this one, it's an area where we've run a bunch of different detectors, the red line, the V1, the RX65S7, and in this case, the video that I'm about to show you, the Whistler XTR 693 SE. And in this video, you're going to go ahead and see the detection points for the different detectors. And you'll also get to see where the whistler goes off. Basically, again, the higher end detectors are going to give you plenty of lead time. The whistler goes off when you actually get line of sight and you're able to physically see the radar gun. So by that point, I mean, it's going off when it's got a clear shot to actually register your speed, which is not good. We've tested Cobras there as well, and to be fair, it was a cheaper Cobra. It alerted even later. But anyways, let's go ahead and take a look at the test here with the whistler. So as you can see, the whistler basically started alerting as soon as we had actually line of sight with the radar gun, which is not great. The red line, the V1, and the RX65S7 all alerted down lower on the hill when we were not yet in the kill zone and getting our speed registered, and so we had sufficient time to actually slow down if this was actually a real scenario and not just a testing event. So as you can see, depending on the course, even a constant on source like this, it may be very tough. And it's one of the reasons why you'll want a higher end detector. Next, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the V1, which is going to be one of the top tier detectors. And even in this situation, I'm going to go ahead and show you a situation where you had very little reaction time. Sometimes, depending on your terrain, every second matters. I mean, half a second, a fraction of a second is going to make a big deal. And this is one of those situations where you want a detector that's not only very sensitive, but can also react very quickly as soon as the alert is present. And this is going to be in a situation, again, where we've got a lot of trees and some curves. So let's take a look. that's it. That's all the warning we had. Let's take another look at that. I know it was pretty quick. The truck that went by, that white truck on the left-hand side, was the sheriff, and that was the guy running a constant on K-band gun. And we had, I mean, just what, a matter of seconds or so to slow down. So let's take another quick look at that. Just enough time to where the V1 starts alerting and we have got enough time to slow down. Actually kind of similar to that first Whistler test that we saw. So this is one of those things where, I mean, even the V1 can have a hard time. If the terrain is very tough, I mean, every ounce of detection and sensitivity that you can get is very important. That can be the difference between a ticket or not, you know? Like, it's a big deal. So it's really not an area that you necessarily want to skimp on. In addition to raw sensitivity, there's another thing that's very important, and that's reactivity, which means detecting very brief signals. And what I mean by that is when you've got signals at a distance, you're going to have a lot of objects potentially in the way, again, depending on the terrain. You can have things like vehicles and traffic up ahead of you, kind of potentially blocking the signal. Same thing with trees. There's signals trying to make it through the trees to get to you. And so you're going to want a detector that's not only very sensitive to weak signals, but will also alert to a very brief signal. A detector that's kind of sluggish and requires a really long signal to alert to, just because it's slower at scanning, or maybe it's got additional filters enabled to help deal with false alerts. You know, this is where some customization matters. But depending on how reactive your detector is can also make a big difference. The next video that we're going to take a look at, I'll tell you first of all, whoops, this was my mistake. I was running two detectors at the same time, and this is a big no-no. If you run two detectors at the same time, they generally will interfere with each other. They'll cause missed alerts, they can cause delayed alerts, they can cause false alerts. You'll just see weird, bad stuff happening, and it's not good. In this test, we're going to be showing you a V1 and a 9500IX at the same time. Again, there's going to be interference, so it's not quite ideal performance, but just for the sake of illustration and nothing more, I'm going to show you a V1 versus a 9500IX. You'll see the V1 actually alert me ahead of time to an instant-on threat ahead of me. You'll see the 9500IX miss the alert altogether. You'll see once I actually see the officer ahead of me who's driving towards me, he waits. Once he's got a clear shot, at that point he then actually presses the button and registers my speed immediately. You'll see the V1 is actually faster and the 9500IX is a little bit slower at alerting. So let's take a look at that. So as you can see, one detector gave me sufficient lead time, the other one did not. And as you can see, that's a pretty clear illustration of why a sensitive detector matters. Also why a very reactive detector matters. Now let's say your detector missed it the first time. It missed the first signal and you don't actually get alerted until you're actually being clocked. Let's take a look at a test now. I'm going to show you from both angles, both from the perspective of, actually I don't think we have the audio. We're going to take a look at the perspective actually from the radar gun itself, and we're going to be shooting instant on just like that scenario. We're going to wait until we actually want to register the speed of the vehicle with our radar gun turned off. No radar is being transmitted, so the detector will not alert. Once we have a clear shot and we see our target, we press the button, the radar gun will register a speed, and as soon as the person driving the vehicle, their detector goes off, they'll go ahead and just slam on the brakes and try to slow down. Let's take a look at that.
Once you get to like 20 miles an hour or so, actually, basically once you hit that, what's it called? Camper. That camper thing, I'll shoot you then. And then as soon as you hear the KA blast, hopefully you'll hear it. I don't know.
I'll try to be up to 25. Just about 20.
That'll be good.
25 is fine.
Yep, and then as soon as you hit it, I'll tell you what speed you're at, like what I clock you at.
Okay.
So, cool. Okay, so here we go. He's going to be around 25 or so. And fire. 22. Okay, and that is too funny.
So as you can see, there's really no chance. Yes, as soon as we press the button, the speed is locked in, and you'll see the speed just drops. You can hear it in the audio Doppler, and you can see it there on the screen. It's pretty clear that that person has a radar detector, and they're trying to outbrake you. However, if you have a clean shot like that, you don't really have the chance of outbraking instant on. Yes, in this situation, it is rainy. And yes, that's a family sedan, and it's not a sports car with, high-end ceramic brakes or anything. In that situation, yes, that car would do better, but keep in mind that a radar gun can acquire a vehicle's speed, in a fraction of a second, maybe 0.2 of a second or so. It's very, very quick. By the time it takes for, when the person presses the button on the radar gun's end, to the radar detector going off, which takes a little bit of time, a couple tenths of a second, sometimes, depending on the detector and filtering. Takes a little bit of time, to your brain registering what's going on, to your foot moving over to the brake, to you pressing the brake, to the brakes actually working and slowing your car down. As you saw in one of the first videos with the whistler around the bend, you just don't have enough time. Even if you're totally expecting the signal, it's just the laws of physics and the time it takes for all that to happen. You can't outbrake instant on if it's got a clear shot like that. And so you're absolutely depending on being able to detect the signal before you're in the kill zone. That's why it's so important. A lot of the tests that we've done so far, they've been against constant on. Sometimes you'll run into instant on, where it's a situation like this where there's no radar being transmitted, and your really only hope is detecting a signal before you're the one being clocked. And a really helpful thing is actually if there's traffic ahead of you, if you're running a rabbit, or if there's just a bunch of other vehicles driving around, if the people ahead of you are being clocked, you'll be able to tell that before it's your turn to be in the kill zone. You'll slow down beforehand, and then by the time it's your turn to be clocked, you're back down, no problem, no big deal, you're set. A lot of the tests that we've done also so far, you'll see there's not really a lot of warning time. We're talking mountains and curves and trees and stuff, right? One thing that you'll hear, this is not every situation. Another kind of the opposite end of the spectrum would be maybe a wide open flat desert. Flat, flat, flat. There's no hills, there's no curves, there's no trees. You can detect signals miles away. And you'll hear people say, I gotta save, it was 2 miles before I passed the police officer, or 4 miles. You'll see some that are 11-mile detection ranges in ideal conditions, and that's fantastic. And you'll hear some people say, like, why in the world do I need a detector that can detect a signal 11 miles away? It'll just be a whole bunch of annoying beeps. And I've got so much time, I don't need a detector that can alert me that far away. And I totally get that. And if every situation you had was ideal situations and circumstances with constant on directly ahead of you, not off axis coming from the side, and you had flat terrain. If you had ideal circumstances every time, then yeah, you don't need the most, the best detector in the world, totally, but real life doesn't work that way. And a good example of that would be, again, somebody running instant on. I'm going to go ahead and show you another video now from the desert, and it's going to be pretty much totally flat terrain. This is going to be a save that's about 2.5 miles away. from the initial detection to passing the officer. I can show you one that's a lot longer, but it's just going to take a while for the video to go, right? So I'm going to show you one that's a little bit shorter, but the same exact principles apply for detecting a signal 5 miles or 10 miles away. The whole idea is that you're going to need a signal that is way up ahead of you. You'll detect it before you're the one being clocked. You'll know that there's radar being used ahead, and you'll slow down with sufficient time to actually avoid the threat. So that's what we're going to go ahead and take a look at here in the next test. And it's this video that Open Road shared with us in Nevada.
I bet it's over this overpass right up here. Hiding on the backside.
And so as you can see in that test, we did detect the signal 2.5 miles away from the actual place where the officer was parked. And he was actually turning his radar gun on and off. He was clocking vehicles, and he'd register their speed, and then he would turn off the radar gun. And this is done specifically to combat people with radar detectors. And the whole goal is that he wants to be able to clock people before they're picking him up. And this is one of the reasons why a really sensitive detector is very important. In this situation, there was a fair amount of traffic, so there were plenty of opportunities to detect the officer. If there was less traffic and he was more selective, he wouldn't have as many opportunities. So the reason that the reason that encounter worked, there were a couple things at play at why the red line did so well. Number one, it's extremely sensitive. It is it's the most sensitive windshield mount detector that you can get, especially when properly configured. The second thing is it's very good at detecting very brief alerts. You'll notice a lot of those alerts were very, very quick. They were not long in duration. There are some mid-range detectors which are actually quite sensitive, and they're very good in terms of sensitivity, but they're not the fastest detectors. They require a longer signal to alert. And so for a shorter, briefer signal, it may actually not go off. And so in that situation, you'll want something that's very reactive, very responsive, and is not only sensitive to weak signals, but is also very responsive to brief signals. And those are two very important keys. You can go for a very inexpensive detector, and you're going to get a very slow, very low sensitivity, not very sensitive detector, and yes, it's better than nothing, and yes, it absolutely can lead to saves, especially in ideal conditions. If you go for a mid-range detector, you can get something that's actually sufficiently sensitive for many scenarios, especially if you're out in situations where it's an easier area for radar detectors to pick up signals, such as flatter, straighter roads. In those situations, it's a lot easier for a detector to alert. In a situation, if you've got a lot of curves, hills, trees, things like that that can obscure the signal, you're really going to want every ounce of detection that you can get. And that's really where the higher end detectors will shine. They're very reactive to brief signals. They're very sensitive to weak signals. They're excellent at signals coming straight at you. They're excellent at signals coming in from an angle. They've really got your back. And this is what matters. I mean, yes, you can save a little bit of money, and I totally get it. Not everybody wants to drop $400, $500, $600 on a radar detector, and on some, maybe a phone and a Bluetooth module and all this kind of stuff, right? The whole package. I totally understand. And there are absolutely situations where you can get a more affordable detector, and it can and will give you saves. Arguably, it's better than nothing, but there are absolutely situations where it will fail you. So it's kind of one of those things where, yes, you'll read reviews of people online and they said, hey, I bought this inexpensive detector and I haven't gotten a ticket in 5 years. Awesome. Probably a combination of the fact that, the detector did a good job. Maybe they're in easy terrain. Maybe they just weren't speeding at the time. I mean, there's all sorts of things where even people who don't have radar detectors can drive and not get tickets, even if they're speeding, right? Just sometimes you're fortunate and you're lucky and things happen. So just because you're not getting tickets doesn't mean that you've got a good radar detector. The whole thing about radar detectors is you can still go for the best radar detector that money can buy. You can get the best laser jammers you can get. You can just go all out and run Waze. You can get airplane scanners. You can have a police scanner to actually listen into what the police are saying on their radios. I mean, you can go all out and still get tickets. There's nothing that you can do that's going to be totally making you immune to getting speeding tickets if you're speeding. Really what your objective here is to just help stack the odds in your favor. In a way, it's kind of like birth control. Like if you don't want to get pregnant, don't have sex, right? You can use birth control. It's not necessarily 100% effective, but it can really help kind of reduce the odds. And in a way, it's the exact same things with countermeasures. The better products you get, the better your odds at avoiding tickets. You're not going to get totally bulletproof connection or protection, but you are going to really help set it up in such a way where you've got the best odds possible at being protected in almost any situation out there. Again, not totally bulletproof, not 100%, but just stacking the odds in your favor, and that's really the goal here. When we're talking about driving with a detector, if you get a ticket, I mean, what's the downside? You've got the cost of the ticket, you've got court fees, you've got insurance hikes, you've got lawyer fees, you've got potentially, time you got to miss work to go to court. There's just so much headache and hassle and stress and all that kind of stuff, right? So yes, I totally get it that you can save $100, $200, $300 by going for a mid-range or even a low-range radar detector. And yes, you can get saves. I'm not saying at all that that's useless, but it's good to know that those detectors still have some pretty big flaws and weak points that you can still get nailed running those ones. And so me personally, this is really the reason why I like to run and why I recommend a lot of the top tier detectors like the Redline or the V1 or the Max 2. I mean, it's really going to give you that solid radar detection performance, and I don't really believe in half-assing it. Like, if you're going to do it right. This is really a pay-to-play game. Go for gold or just don't bother. I mean, do it right. Really, that's kind of my perspective. It's not necessarily the right perspective, it's just my perspective. And again, you can get some gems by saving a little bit of money if you're willing to compromise on some features, some sensitivity levels, reactivity capabilities. Yes, you can save some money and you can still get saves from the detectors. But I would generally recommend going for the higher end detectors if you're really looking for solid performance. This applies in flat terrain, this applies in hilly terrain, This applies in easy terrain. This applies in difficult terrain. Generally speaking, it is really worth going for the top tier products. So there we go. I hope that's been helpful. I really wanted to cover a lot of stuff to really help you guys understand the differences and not just say, well, get this one because I know what I'm talking about, so you should do what I recommend. It's not that at all. It's, here you go. Let's just help you understand the differences so that you can make an educated decision on what you feel is best for you, so that you really understand what you're getting into and what the limitations are. So yeah, cool. I hope that's been helpful. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and ask down below. If you like this kind of stuff, thumbs up. It does help me. It's the way YouTube works. And subscribe if you like this. I'm going to keep putting out more of these. So cool. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I will see you guys next time. Until next time.